people have. And my experience was that there was another side to these folks.
Jim, do you want to briefly comment, and I'll talk to you at greater length and depth in the next segment?
Well, excuse me, I'm a Christian. I don't believe that we should judge one another. And I knew John Ramsey intimately for 22 years. He came to my rescue twice. Once when I was in a wheelchair and laid up in Florida. He came down to see me and gave me a job, and we started a business together. And then 10 years later, when my wife and I were financially distraught, I called him up, and he immediately gave me a job with Access Graphics. Also, one other incident where we were supporting a Centaurus High School paraplegic, quadriplegic, who needed therapy, and my wife and I had a bake sale, and we raised $350 or so. I went into John, I said, John, would you match these funds? Without hesitation, he opened up his checkbook and wrote a check. All I'm trying to say to you is that he had
On the morning after Christmas, 1996, in a quiet, wealthy Colorado neighborhood, a 6-year-old girl was reported missing. Hours later, her body was found in the basement of her own home. The murder of JonBenet Ramsey instantly became a national obsession, a dark fairy tale of wealth, child beauty pageants, and unimaginable horror. For years, the story was told one way, and it was aimed squarely at her parents, John and Patsy Ramsey. The narrative was built on their seemingly bizarre behavior, a strange and lengthy ransom note, and theories of a family argument gone horribly wrong. This version of events cemented itself in the public's mind, a story repeated so often it felt like the truth. Theories about rage over bedwetting, a staged kidnapping, a jealous brother, they all painted a picture of a dysfunctional family hiding a monstrous secret. But as compelling as these stories were, they all hinged on one critical assumption, that there was no one else in the Ramsey house that night, that the evil came from within. This is the story of the one piece of evidence that proves that assumption is almost certainly wrong. We're going to show how a single microscopic DNA sample from an unknown man not only led to the family being cleared, but also revealed the fatal flaw that sent the entire investigation in the wrong direction from day one. This is how modern science is rewriting one of the most infamous unsolved murders in American history. To get why the DNA evidence changes everything, we have to go back to the beginning and understand why the family became the primary focus. Let's lay out the undisputed facts of December 26, 1996. At 5:52 a.m., Patsy Ramsey made a frantic 911 call telling the operator her daughter was gone and that she'd found a ransom note on the back staircase. That note was one of the first and weirdest pieces of evidence. It was incredibly long, 2.5 pages, and written on a notepad from inside the house with a pen from the house. It demanded $118,000, a strangely specific number that was almost the exact amount of a recent work bonus John Ramsey had received. The note was rambling, filled with movie quotes, and signed with the cryptic initials SBTC. The author claimed to be from a small foreign faction that respected John's business but not his country. The specific dollar amount and the use of household items immediately made police suspicious. It felt personal, it felt staged. The initial police response is now seen by many as a catastrophic failure. The first officer on the scene did a quick search but didn't find JonBenet. Critically, he didn't secure the home as a crime scene. Soon, friends and family were walking around making coffee and cleaning surfaces, potentially contaminating what should have been a protected crime scene. John Ramsey was even allowed to leave to make arrangements for the ransom money. For nearly 7 hours, everyone treated the house like a kidnapping scene, not a murder scene. They waited for a call from the kidnappers that never came. Growing frustrated, a detective finally told John Ramsey and a family friend to do a top-to-bottom search of the house. It was then that John went straight to the basement. In a small windowless room, often called the wine cellar, he found his daughter's body. 6-year-old JonBenet was discovered covered by a white blanket with black duct tape placed across her mouth. A nylon cord bound her wrist and was connected to a broken paintbrush handle, forming what investigators later described as a garrote. Officials noted additional evidence in their report, ultimately listing multiple factors in their official findings. The discovery of her body inside the home only made the police focus harder on the family. To investigators, the story seemed to be writing itself, a kidnapping that wasn't a kidnapping, a ransom note written in the house, a body hidden in the basement. The simplest explanation often seemed to be that there was no intruder, that the crime was an inside job. This is where the theories that have defined the case for a generation began. The media, fed by leaks from law enforcement sources, painted John and Patsy as prime suspects. Their behavior was put under a microscope. They were slammed for hiring lawyers instead of, in the public's eye, cooperating fully with the police. Armchair body language experts analyzed their early TV interviews, declaring them cold, deceptive, or simply not grieving the right way. The family rage theory took over. One version centered on JonBenet's struggles with bedwetting. The story suggested by some was that Patsy, under stress and concerned about appearances, lost control on Christmas night and lashed out at JonBenet. The cord and the staged kidnapping note were then described as part of a desperate attempt to cover what had happened. Even the bowl of pineapple discovered in the kitchen was pulled into this theory. Some speculated that her older brother Burke, who was 9, had hit her with a flashlight in a fight over the pineapple, and the parents covered it up to protect their son. These theories were explosive and they were everywhere. They offered a simple, if horrifying, explanation. And for years, law enforcement seemed to lean in this direction. The Boulder District Attorney at the time, Alex Hunter, famously said, "I believe that the people who know what happened are speaking to us through this investigation." The implication was clear. The family knew. The story suggested by some was that Patsy, under stress and concerned about appearances, lost control on Christmas night and lashed out at JonBenet. The cord and the staged kidnapping note were then described as part of a desperate attempt to cover what had happened. Ramseys were guilty, convicted by years of relentless media speculation. It all seemed to fit together. This became the myth of the JonBenet Ramsey case, a myth that was about to be shattered by a microscopic piece of evidence that had been there all along. And that's where the story takes a sharp turn. This is the piece of the puzzle that never quite fit the family did it narrative. While the media focused on psychological theories, the forensic evidence was starting to tell a very different story written in the language of DNA. During the autopsy, the coroner collected samples, including scrapings from under JonBenet's fingernails and swabs from her long johns and underwear. In 1997, early DNA testing was done on these samples. The technology wasn't as sensitive as it is today, but it still found something stunning: a small amount of male DNA in a bloodstain on JonBenet's underwear. And that male was not John Ramsey, it was not Burke Ramsey, it wasn't anyone in the family. This was just the beginning. As DNA technology got better, scientists could analyze smaller and smaller samples using a technique to find what's known as touch DNA, the tiny traces of genetic material we leave behind whenever we touch something. In the mid-2000s, the evidence was re-examined with these advanced methods, and the results were explosive. The same male DNA profile from the bloodstain was found in multiple other spots on her clothes. It was on the waistband of her long johns. 2 separate sources of this unknown man's DNA were on the outside of her underwear. This wasn't a random trace. It was repeated and consistent. This genetic profile was given a name, unidentified male profile. Let's be clear about what this means. This wasn't a confusing jumble of different people's DNA. It was a clear, repeated profile of one single unknown man who was not a Ramsey and not on any list of friends or family who had been in the house. The DNA provided powerful scientific evidence that an unknown male had come into contact with JonBenet's underwear. In 2008, the Boulder District Attorney's Office, once so focused on the family, made a dramatic announcement. District Attorney Mary Lacey wrote a letter directly to John Ramsey, informing him that new DNA testing had officially cleared him, his late wife Patsy, and their son Burke as suspects. She wrote, "The DNA evidence has vindicated your family to the extent that we may have contributed in any way to the public perception that you might have been involved in this crime. I am deeply sorry." This was a bombshell. For the first time, an official source was stating what the evidence had been pointing to for years: the presence of unidentified male profile. One powerfully supported the intruder theory, the very theory the Ramseys had maintained from the beginning. So why didn't this change everything overnight? The original family rage story was simple and emotional. The DNA story, on the other hand, was complex. It was science, and it left a very uncomfortable question. If the Ramseys didn't do it, who did? Unidentified male profile one was run through CODIS, the National Criminal Database, but there was no match. He was a ghost. This is where a revolutionary technique comes in: forensic genetic genealogy. It's the same method that caught the Golden State Killer. For decades, investigators had his DNA, but no matches in CODIS. The case went cold. Then they uploaded his DNA profile to public genealogy websites, where people upload their DNA to find relatives. They weren't looking for the suspect, they were looking for his cousins. By building out family trees from these distant relatives, they eventually zeroed in on their suspect, Joseph James D'Angelo, solving a 40-year-old mystery. This exact technique could be the key to finally identifying unidentified male profile 1. The DNA found on JonBenet's clothing is a distinct profile, believed by many experts to be viable enough for this kind of genealogical search. This isn't a long shot, it's the new gold standard for cold cases. So let's break down exactly how this DNA dismantles the old myths. First, it contradicts the idea that this was purely an inside job. The presence of a foreign male's DNA on the victim's intimate clothing is the textbook definition of evidence of an intruder. Some have tried to explain it away, suggesting it's from a factory worker who made the clothes. But forensic experts find this highly unlikely. The DNA was found in multiple spots, including in blood. That points to a direct interaction, not incidental contact months earlier. Second, it challenges the popular bedwetting motive. A parent suddenly losing control is a story about an unplanned outburst. But the details here suggest something far more calculated. The garrote itself was unusually complex, and the official reports included findings that raised further troubling questions. Altogether, these elements don't match the idea of a spur-of-the-moment family incident. They point instead toward the possibility of an outside intruder with a darker intent. Third, it forces us to reevaluate all the suspicious evidence. Take the ransom note. If an intruder was inside the house for hours, waiting for the family to sleep, what else would he use? Bringing his own pen and paper would be risky. The rambling nature of the note could be the work of an unstable person, or a deliberate and wildly successful attempt to mislead investigators. With the DNA confirming an intruder was present, this is no longer automatically evidence of staging by the family, it's evidence of an intruder's actions. The DNA evidence acts as a key that reframes the entire case. It shows that the initial investigation was flawed because it started from the wrong assumption. By focusing on the Ramseys, investigators failed to properly secure the crime scene and pursued psychological theories while the biological proof of an intruder sat in an evidence locker. The science here is what blows this case wide open, proving that so much of what we thought we knew was probably wrong. It's a powerful reminder of how critical scientific evidence is. We're about to get into the renewed investigation and what's happening right now to finally identify this unknown man. But first, if you want more deep dives that cut through the noise of famous cases, take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It's the best way to support our work. Now, let's talk about the hunt for unidentified male profile. 1. The official exoneration in 2008 should have marked a pivot, a full-scale public hunt for the man whose DNA was the only physical link to the murder. But for years, the case remained frustratingly stuck. The Boulder Police Department was criticized for not being more aggressive with new DNA technologies, perhaps reluctant to abandon its long-held suspicions. This is where John Ramsey's relentless advocacy comes in. Having lost his daughter to a murderer and his wife Patsy to cancer in 2006, John has spent decades fighting to clear his family's name and get justice for JonBenet. He has become a vocal critic of the Boulder police, accusing them of being stuck on their initial theories and refusing to fully embrace the evidence. In recent years, his fight has focused on one thing: getting that DNA into the hands of outside labs that specialize in genetic genealogy. He's petitioned the governor of Colorado to move the case from the Boulder police to an independent agency, arguing that fresh eyes and a focus on the DNA is the only way forward. He has even offered to pay for the advanced testing himself. This public pressure has finally started to move the needle. In late 2022, the Boulder Police and the District Attorney's Office announced a renewed effort. They confirmed they would be consulting with the Colorado Cold Case Review Team and would be using new DNA technology to retest evidence. This was a major development. After years of perceived inaction, there was a public commitment to exploring the very science that solved the Golden State Killer case. So what does this new investigation look like? It's a painstaking process of re-examining every piece of evidence collected in 1996, hoping to find more samples of unidentified male profile to strengthen the existing profile. The primary goal, however, remains his identification through forensic genetic genealogy. This would involve uploading the profile to specialized databases and having genealogists build out family trees to find him. It's a process that has solved hundreds of cold cases. There's every reason to believe it can solve this one too. This renewed focus also forces us to confront the damage caused by the initial flawed investigation. For decades, the public narrative was dominated by suspicion of the Ramseys. This destroyed a family's reputation and, more importantly, allowed the real suspect to remain free, shielded by a cloud of misinformation. The DNA evidence suggests the failure in the JonBenet Ramsey case wasn't a lack of clues, but a failure of interpretation. The DNA of an unknown male was on the victim's body. That should have been the central guiding fact of the investigation. Instead, it was treated like an inconvenient anomaly. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of confirmation bias, where investigators favor information that confirms their existing beliefs while ignoring evidence that contradicts them. The unanswered questions are no longer about the family's behavior or the pineapple. The questions now are sharp and scientific. Who is unidentified male profile 1? How did he get into the house? Was it random or did he know the family? These are the questions that can finally be answered by following the DNA. The story of JonBenet Ramsey has been told the same way for over 25 years. A story of a strange ransom note, a chaotic crime scene, and a family under a cloud of guilt. But the objective, irrefutable science of DNA tells a different story. The narrative of a domestic dispute has been replaced by the chilling reality of an intruder, a ghost in the system whose only trace is his genetic signature. The DNA strongly suggests the initial investigation was flawed because it was focused on a theory that the science simply doesn't support. Now, thanks to advancements in genetic genealogy and the tireless advocacy of John Ramsey, the hunt is finally on for the right person, the unidentified male profile. The case has been transformed from a whodunit into a manhunt driven by science. The final chapter is still unwritten. But for the first time in a long time, there's a clear path forward. The science exists to give this ghost a name. The story is no longer about if the family did it. It's about when we will finally find the man who did. The evidence is clear. The technology is ready. But what do you think? Do you believe this DNA evidence is the key to finally solving this murder? And what does it say about our justice system when a family can be cleared by science but still judged so harshly in the court of public opinion? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.